of our mistakes and the willingness
right?
to fix them, the willingness to do the right thing when and on any level. I mean,
Yeah,
if you know, it's not just on the, I mean, if we can't do it on our small level, how do we expect others on that mass level to acknowledge their faults or their evils,
right.
whatever you want to call it?
And
So
there's
let's
an accountability in that. Like, we think of how little, like when we weigh, put everybody's sins on the scale, the majority of us, in light of that, think, oh, like my sins really are nothing compared to that. But do we still, do we, take that responsibility, or do we brush it under the rug just as they did with theirs? It's all about your
exactly,
personal integrity. And how are you going to live when, even when others aren't seeing you? How do you choose to live? That's the character of a
exactly,
man.
exactly. It's easy to blame the demons and the elites for the atrocities they commit, but um, are you cheating with your coworker? Are you lying to your child? Are
Right.
you, you know,
And
bottom
all of
line,
it's on legal ground. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter what it
exactly.
is. Sin is all, is all unrighteousness, and that is the enemy's legal ground. And
And
it's the foothold, the toes. Are we, blaming them and upset at them wanting justice, and yet we're giving the enemy all these toeholds in it through our lives
exactly.
onto the land, you know?
It's so true because it's kind of like as we're speaking now, we talk about sorry, my dog next door. I call her my dog because she barks at me like that when she wants treats. So she's obviously heard me. Now she wants treats, but I'm not going to give her treats now. Anyway, so it's like think about the psyops they create to keep us diverted, right? We know this. Now think about what a massive psyop this might be. They will keep you thinking that it's them that need to be blamed or have the fault, but have you looked at the things you need to fix? It's
Yeah.
much easier to look at the chaos out there and what the Luciferians are doing and how you can't wait for them to go to Gitmo and whatever else. But are you paying your staff a livable wage? Are you taking care of your neighbors' starving animals while they're away, or do you just call the police and have your neighbors arrested? Do you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? What are you doing to actually make your world a better place? What are you doing to remain honest and true? Are you lying to people and deceiving them? Are you pretending to do something and then not do it?
Hmm.
Only you will know. And as long as you are doing that, you too are as guilty as that guy up there cannibalizing kids. And I'm not saying you are cannibalizing kids. Let's just get that clear, okay? I'm
Right.
saying you have no right to actually want to harm someone or see another come to harm while you yourself are acting in a harmful way. In any, whether it's to your children, to your spouse, to someone who you think
Well, sin
deserves it.
affects the land. I mean, we see that
Exactly.
even in scripture with King
Energy.
David. King David thought, the Lord, he told him to get his army ready. Um, you know, a vast army, I forget exactly how many, but let's just say it was like, you know, a couple 100,000. And the Lord said, don't count your soldiers. You're going to just go into battle. You're going to trust that you have what it takes to go against this enemy. Well, what happened, little voices started coming at him. How can you march against the enemy when you don't even know if you've got enough men to make the fight equal? you know, and he ended up, what did he do? He counted the men. And that sin, what happened after that? A plague went through, killed over 20,000 in his army. The Lord took out men. So think about that. You know, our sin affects those around us, it affects the land, something that we may think is minimal, that, you know, maybe accounts to nothing, we think. And yet, what is the impact of that little toehold that we give the enemy? It can cost us more than we know, you know?
So crazy. We have to look within. It's really
Yeah,
all about that. Because the more of that we do, remember everything is sound, frequency, and vibration. We're never going to get away from that. Your own core sound, frequency, and vibration then changes too,
yeah,
because you've acknowledged your own shortcomings. And now instead of wanting to harm someone else because of their wrongdoing, you will much rather want to be of assistance as opposed to chopping any heads off.
right.
Very interesting indeed. Anyway, Jess, should we get going with our
Yeah.
always an
So to
interesting
kind of
topic? I mean, always our topics are online, but
Yeah. Well, I think we forgot to pray for this episode
yeah.
too, so let's do that quick too. Heavenly Father, as we come before you today, we just bring to account ourselves, Lord. We know that, you know, it does no good if we hold others to a standard that we don't even hold ourselves to. Father, help us to be those that are upright in all our ways, those that choose to do what's right, even when it's difficult. Lord, we thank you that we have permission not to sin, but we have permission, Lord, that there's going to be times we're going to fall short. And in those moments, we can confess our sins, we can turn and we can choose to do things differently. Strengthen us, help us to walk out our faith. Um, in light of the truth, and let us be those that always are open and laid bare before you, um, you know, and choosing to do what is right in your eyes even when others cannot see. Let us be mindful that you see, Lord, and to bring those things to account before you. We thank you. We ask that you would bless this conversation today. And we ask that you would bless our technology, our equipment, our airwaves, and our internet. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So as we look at this, you know, we're looking at all the upcoming stuff that this new Pope is doing in regards to preparations for the marriage of the beast ceremony. And we talked about that in the first episode that, you know, what is that? That's a ceremony that the hierarchy children are going to go through. It usually takes place around age 7, but it can be anywhere from age 5 to 7. You know, they're going to be dressed in white. The little girls, you know, they made us wear these fluffy dresses with patent buckle shoes and those horrid white socks with lace on them, um, and with veils and stuff like that. But, you know, this is going to be, you know, on the daytime ceremony, it's going to look like the children have gone through catechism. From this, it will open up for them. For most of the children, it'll be the first time that they receive communion. Um, you know, then in the evening ceremonies in the system, it's going to be, you know, part of the unholy mass and the beginning of, um, you know, it might not be the first time uh, that they've drank blood, but it's going to go with the drinking of blood and the eating of the flesh, and you know they'll start to become regular participators in that at their circle groups at the highest level. Um, it also will be when they enter into the demonic relics, which means that they'll be having sex with demons as well as There'll be times with the engaging with the bestiality. Um, and then you also have kind of simultaneously um, the marriage of beast ceremony is also used for um, the marriage ceremony for the brides of Satan. And you'll get them entering into certain things, certain areas. Um, they're using the canonization of the saints along with the Jubilee of the adolescents to kind of display candidates and the areas that they're from and some of the specs that they're bringing to the table for um, the brides of Satan as they're being brought forward. So people at the quadrant levels of the system understand, what are the specs, what areas are being opened up in those quadrants, and who's going to kind of have authority and what authority are they pulling on. They're going to make it look like holy deeds, like they're honoring the dead, but really it's just a form of necromancy at the highest level that they're participating in. So let's continue. So we covered the first show. We did Maria Rendeles and Jose Gregorio Hernandez, which are the first two on the upper section shown here. Now we're going to get into the next few, one of those being Peter Toureau. So go ahead. So Peter Toureau comes out of the Papua New Guinea area, the section closer to Australia. So go ahead to the next one. And when you see it, like I liked this one because you kind of see the upper map there of Papua New Guinea, and its connection to the Australia area. It seems like it's a fairly small little island area. Go ahead to the next one. So the area that he comes out of is kind of upper Papua New Guinea there. We see Rakunai, kind of upper middle area there. And, as we're looking at this, we're looking at like how are they moving in the system? How are they creating these new territories of focus? And it's not that these areas are new to them. These aren't unestablished areas. They have just been, areas that they'll go to and operate under behind the scenes, but they're, now making it more announced because they're going to have more use, more traffic coming through these areas. So, how do they get away with explaining why all of a sudden there's more traffic through these areas? It's like, oh, it's just because that's everybody's going to see, they want to visit the area where these new Canaanite saints come from, right? So that's how they're going to explain the traffic from now on. You get all these good Catholics that are going to travel and do these journeys and these processions and participate in these feasts at these special areas where these saints are from, right? So that's one of the ways they cover what they're doing. So, when we're looking at the Papua New Guinea area, it's connected or is an offshoot of the New Britain area. And, one of their high areas here, go ahead to the next one, you're going to get, their church here, which just looks like this sweet little nice church out in the middle of nowhere. But what are they doing underground? The truth is that they're establishing areas where they can have their feasts and their adrenochrome and begin new vampire communities. The closest vampire societies to this Papua New Guinea area are um, in Brisbane, Australia, which is the upper part, kind of that upper peninsula tip of Australia there. Um, so, they're going to be expanding into this new area from, I think, from there. But go ahead and you have, let me put it this way, more than, like when I mentioned how many clubs there were on average in an area, like how their communities work is you'll see like regionally you'll have all these states that within the United States that show up, or you'll have big cities on worldwide. And the way that they build is that when you go into a state, you'll usually have 5 or 6 big cities within that state that will have established vampire communities. Um, and you're gonna, each state that you go into may have anywhere from 5 or more underground areas that they're operating out of within that. And I talk about that in my land assignment coaching courses. So I encourage people. I'm always putting up new ones when the next ones are available. You can access and sign up for those on my website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. But in land assignments 1 through 4, I talk about how they establish that underground. And you can know exactly where your vampire communities are within your region. And the underground is massive, but they display the underground through their above ground maps. One of the easiest ways in your city is to simply just look at how the Catholic churches are established. You just type in Catholic churches in the city and the state, and you'll kind of see the little pinpoints pop up on a map. And usually those pinpoints are in a triangular formation, either a right side up triangle or an upside down triangle. And the important thing in that when you see that, when you see where those churches are, what it tells you is where the shared underground space is. But that shared massive underground space is going to have offshoots. So that's where you get your multiple communities established underground, and each area will just be known to, those protectors, because your vampires are going to be connected to the protectors of the system. Their job is to know a specific underground area because they'll be used to move elite in and out of there if they need to in those underground tunnels in those areas. So you'll get those that are kind of keepers over their own little areas and territories. Quadrantly, they're going to be established under your crests, your bigger cities. It's common when you're looking at any area to see 5 or more of these vampire communities. But like when you get to Australia, the number shoots up. So this is important to understand. Rather than just having 5 or a few more in a regional area, almost every territory you look at in Australia, gosh, there's at least like 8, most of them 10 or more. I think, the average number that I counted per area was 13 vampire communities within each regional area, which is massive, which just pretty much means you got all these vampires living underground in Australia. But it's huge because, why do they have so many in that area? Australia and New Zealand, are like islands. Um, you know, it's not just these offshoot areas where, originally countries would drop off their prisoners and you had this community established. Um, Underground Australia is what is important, um, because you have one of the, you know, you've got massive underground training facilities, hidden military dumb bases under there, um, Nazi facilities, both under New Zealand and Australia, while in the United States, one of the highest, training, CIA training establishments is called the Farm. Um, in Australia, you have Alpha. So, you know, everything is underground, under there, under the water. So that's why you see so many vampire communities, because there's so many darn layers, you know, underground in Australia. Um, so, that they've got a lot under there because there's so much operational demand for that area. But let's
Australia,
keep,
as
go ahead.
Australia really is, they definitely,
Yeah,
I mean, you all know I've been speaking to Australians for years now. It's shocking. It's just so over the top bad there, really.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
um,
high vampirism. So this guy, Bartolo Longo, um, he's from Latiano, Italy. So go ahead to the map. And, I'm our purpose in this isn't to find out about the saints. That's why I'm not saying much information really about them. We're highlighting, the connections to those that they're displaying. So Latanio is, region that is kind of on the heel end of the boot there in Italy. Again, we're seeing another area where there's a huge amount of access to water. I can't emphasize that enough, that, how close these areas are to massive amounts of water. And that plays a huge part. you know, let's think back to Chicago, because, really, where is this Pope going with a lot of this decisions, and, you know, and how it interconnects with the position of the brides of Satan. The bride's job is to show up whenever Lucifer's in town and to kind of be his escort for the night, or as long as he's in town. Um, with that, though, it's not just that. Does Lucifer only come into town for ceremonies or rituals? No, because at the end of the day, these are Nazis. He isn't just running a government, the Luciferian Brotherhood. Lucifer also is running a military, the Sovereign Military Order. That military not just being made up of protectors and supreme preceptors, your quadrant leaders, preceptors, your regional level, and knights. You know, this sovereign military is connected to demonic generals, representing principalities, powers, authorities. What is, one of the um, strongest end time generals in, if we're speaking military terms, in Lucifer's army, it's Leviathan. You also have Ashtaroth, you have Abaddon. And so, you're going to see a lot of connection to the waterways, because you're going to have the connection between spirits, principalities that have authority over land, as well as those that have authority over water. Um, the brides of Satan, even though they're not necessarily used militarily within the system, you know, they're still going to be at some level connected to contracts through Solomonic magic with those spirits. So it's about the spiritual alliances, the areas that are chosen. And you're going to have areas not only with a lot of water, but connecting and intersecting with your ley lines, your energy, your spiritual gate areas, which is why we're showing the churches as well. Um, because these areas are going to connect both above ground as well as below ground. Um, and you get massive facilities underground. Um, what is the scope of reach in Solomonic magic for these churches with these big seals? They're basically operating gates, um, that operate worldwide, one connecting to another. We've talked about how the structure of a building, the face front of these churches, tells you what kind of spiritual gate it is. And, we've seen a lot so far with the 3 columns on the face front, meaning that it marks the northern wall underground, and you'll have an altar on the western wall. But those three columns, any other church or any other building that has a face front with those 3 columns, they can access from a point A to any point B, C, D, E that has the three columns. So, all that we're looking at so far, I mean, it pretty much is looking like you get a lot of access points, including to, under, we'll just say gates to Hades, so they can get down to Hades multiple ways from all of these areas.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, and all intersecting with Chicago as well. So go ahead to the next one here. So in Latiano, you have the Collegiata di Santa Maria. This just is a massive, massive church. We see the structure a little different. We don't see as elaborate of a seal. We see, your base, kind of, we call it the half sunshine, which is going to be your first pentacle of the sun in Solomonic magic. So we don't see this area as high as established in Solomonic magic as others. We don't necessarily see the big pentacle towers like we saw in the other churches. This one seems much more simple. We just see a single tower, but we see a clock on that tower. Why is that? It's not so the people in the town can tell time. It's for those that astral project. But the other big thing we're looking at is what's below ground. Um, what are they looking to really build under there? A lot of times the older, what seems abandoned or unused, can be more of a private area for them. So the underground, I think this underground goes all the way to another church in the area, Our Lady of the Sacred Church. And you do have a lot of vampire communities in Italy as well. The closest established one to this area is that you have both Torino, Italy, and as well as Naples, um, which are a little further out. So, a lot of, I guess I'll just say you've got the Pope kind of really expanding out. And of course, because he's established there in Rome, you're going to see more going, building in that country as well while he's there. Go ahead to the next one. So the next one we have is Vincenza Maria um, Poloni, and the picture behind her is the church that we're going to look at. She's out of Verona, Italy. So go ahead to the map. We see that area instead of, the Latiano area was down off of the heel of the boot, but we see the Verona area very high up there. What's interesting about that is that um, Verona is also the name of a town in Wisconsin that, um, you kind of get a few of your smaller, more quiet areas in the north, um, all around some central brotherhood areas around the Madison, Wisconsin areas. So Verona is one of those out of Wisconsin. So I don't think it's by accident that this Pope is highlighting the area by the same name in Italy. Verona is a very established brotherhood little town in Wisconsin, that is used a lot by your mothers of darkness and upper elite individuals. So um, you also have, it not being or being close to the Milan area, which is, it's a very central area there. Um, but you get a lot of high level underground, and you get a lot of necromancy coming out of those areas. Like when you go to both areas here, both Italy as well as um, Verona, Wisconsin, like when you go there, it just looks like there's a bunch of little churches. You see a lot of graveyards. Um, so I think the highlight really is the necromancy, the accessing of the dead. Um, so that brings us then to Miss Vincenza. Go to the next one. She's connected to, which this is what we saw in the picture behind her, the Vincenza, the Saint Maria Antica um, church, which, is connected to the Scaliger tombs. The church is the tombs as well. So, it serves both as a church as well as the tombs. Now, the difference with this is the desecrated ground. Um, just because it's tombs doesn't mean there's anything below ground. Usually, like your catacombs are built below ground, so they'll have the placement of the bodies underground, and you'll have a shared, ritual ground with the desecrated graveyard underground. Tombs and graveyards are above ground usually. Like a graveyard's going to be, where it's above ground, but you still bury people in the ground, just it's not in big catacombs versus your tombs, they'll bury people, they'll have like mausoleums or buildings that serve as the tomb. Um, so, that's the difference between them. So we have this massive church that also serves as the tombs above ground.
Wow.
But I think they've got catacombs under there too.
That's wild.
Yeah. So go ahead to the next one. So like you're in Rome, like when we did the Holy Doors decode, we talked about the 5 churches there, the Basilica of St. Peter being one of them. And remember, we talked about the copper canopy, that they have the altar there, but what's below that altar under the copper canopy, they have a whole step down area that you go down into. And when you walk into that, that's the tomb. right? So it's kind of like the same with this church where, literally the church itself, the building is part of um, where people are buried. So it could look like this, where you have sections that, literally they've sculpted the tomb into the sides. It could be inside or outside or kind of in a lower part underground of the church where they have sculpted out tomb areas and they'll put the caskets or the urns, whatever they're burying the people in. And you've got people that are going to tend to these tombs. It's their job to, dust them, make sure they stay in, the dead stay in them. I don't know what else they do down there, but um,
There's nothing.
hey
I don't want
Joe, you still in there, sir? Father Padre. Oh no,
I
Father
mean,
Padre's not there today. Where did he go? Send out, send out the guards. Father Padre's on the loose.
I mean, their obsession with the dead is on another level, right? I mean,
Right?
isn't life here for the living? I mean, aren't we here to live, right? I mean, all they do is obsess over the dead. It just
Well, they
shows that
take better care of the dead than they do the living. That's the sad
my
part.
point. Exactly. I was going to say, what about the people that are needing food, sustenance, right? And look at those things they're drawing or carving, or
Right?
how much. I don't want to think how much one block of that could benefit a person that's actually living, that is in poverty, right? It's just ludicrous to me. I mean, how do people not see
I mean,
this?
put a little bed in there, put a door, and you'd have this nice little territory and little housing unit. I mean, you'd have these beautiful built. Think if you had these. I used to always think of that as a kid. These beautiful churches. If you got to live in it, have a room, and have your little sacred space too. There'd be so much housing available if you had these church community houses. Um, but yeah, sadly, they'd focus more on the dead than they do the living. But that's
I
part
mean,
of their necromancy.
look at that Queen's diamond just on that she has from South Africa. If she had to pay the royal family who whose part of South Africa that diamond came from, as they should, because that's how it should be, right?
Yeah.
That community would be thriving. So it's like they take from the living to give to the dead and then turn it into solid monuments of
Hmm.
chunks of stone or
Altars.
rock.
What is a hunk of stone, or wood? Usually it's an altar. It's a place where they're going to have demonic attachments, authorities, and they're going to bring people in to worship at that place. Um, you know,
Obsessed with the dead again. Obsessed with the
right?
dead again. Yeah, M13 sounds like a scam. That definitely sounds like a scam to me. I love
Right?
this.
So, so let's keep going. So, think about this. Like, I mean, think about your folklores, though, right? These are areas they're highlighting. Welcome to the new Vampire Club. You've got a first-hand view of it before maybe the vampire's already there, but if not, we've got to see it first. Check out their new digs, right? Um, the biggest cities near this where you've had massive vampire communities, of course, are the Milan and the Bologna, the Venice areas. There in Italy, but you know, I don't know. Are they happy with these new digs? I'd rather have a pretty church than one filled with dead, but I mean, vampires do use a lot of graveyards, they use what's available, but I'd kind of pitch a fit on this one because surely there's got to be, more beautiful churches than this. But maybe it's time for a new building, a revamping, right?
Vamping being the operative word.
Right, the revamping. Uh,
Why? Okay, sorry, am I moving on yet or not? Ooh,
yeah. So this guy, Ignazio Maloyan, um, uh, Armenian Archbishop of Mardin, Mardin, Turkey. He's just, looks like a real, real peach here. But go ahead to the next one. We'll show the
no,
map of Mardin, Turkey. Now, what's curious and interesting is, you've got Turkey being an area that Madonna has been targeting, and one that she went through with her Lourdes tour, which people can go back and look at that. We did a show on the Sacred Heart of Mary and talked about Madonna's tour, some of the areas she went, and she had this exquisite magazine display, where at one point she's dressed up as Mary and showing the Sacred Heart with the seven uh, daggers in it. Then you see her at a feast, and you know there's all the one picture had a doll heads and legs and arms attached to her body, and then they show her at a feast with the Last Supper, looking like she's Jesus and everything. um so Turkey has been a targeted area by the Brotherhood for a while now, but look at the placement of Mardin, especially with stuff that we have going on right now. Where do we see it? We see it kind of bordering or being close to borders with Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And we just covered in the Epstein episodes that we did the connection between, some of the islands like Epstein Island and Aleppo, Syria. So, it doesn't surprise me that Mardin, Turkey is now kind of on the list. It's a very, we don't necessarily see it strategically super close to the Mediterranean Sea, but we see it bordering, several areas, that are highly, um, you know, kind of in the spotlight right now with things that are happening. So, definitely keep your eyes on this one. Um, and go ahead to the next one. So, connected to Mardin, Turkey, you have originally um, the church this that Ignazio was operating out of was the Diocese of the Chalidian Church. That has now been dismantled, like it's all ruins. But just because it's ruins doesn't mean that they haven't moved or aren't operating out of a new area. Um, Notice the symbols on the Chaldean church or Chaldean. Where does that word even come from? Um, Chaldean or Chaldean is connected to the land of Ur. That's the area that God called Abraham to come out of, the land of the Canaanites. So, we see, the brotherhood symbols. We see the eight. Look at just the little bits of that symbol. You've got a straight cross with a crossbar right through the middle, a short, all equal inside, telling us you've got Knights of Malta. In fact, two different branches. But notice at the end, instead of capstones on the cross, you've got that, nine pointed star, which is very significant in the system because what that tells you is those 9-pointed stars are going to connect to ritual rotations, and instead of just the required four, um, that each members have to or attend, which are going to be your Easter, your Halloween, your Christmas, and then either the spring or the fall equinox. Um, those 9-pointed stars say that they're going to, you know, they're going to go above and beyond. They're going to be extra stellar, which is a classification in the system. Um, and they're gonna, be really good Luciferians, and they're gonna attend every ritual, um, and maybe even host extra ones than they need to. They're just really gung ho about serving Lucifer. So that's what that tells us. And you know, so you're gonna get a lot in this underground area opening up. And go ahead to the next one. So this is just kind of a bigger picture showing kind of that area, how it's built up, how it's structured. Um, you see a lot of, colonnade face fronts, um, but over a tiered environment. Your Diocese of the Chilean Church, um, is connected. You've got within these areas a couple big monasteries, um, two massive monasteries, one of them being connected to the Chaldean Catholic um, eparchy of Mardin, which is here in this picture. Go ahead, go to the next one. I'm not sure, did I add one more of the,
Yeah,
no,
that
okay,
one.
so, okay, go back just one more. So this, this picture is part of the um, eparchy of Mardin, which is what they've got operating now. They've kind of set up everything to be operating through these massive monasteries that, are big. You both have like the chapel sanctuary areas where they're going to worship. You've got combined with that the tombs, um, where they're going to have the dead, but then that'll be kind of separated from the monastery itself. They'll have a massive area where, you've got your sanctuary and your priests or those monks who will be studying for the priesthood. So it's kind of set up more like an educational internship per se, or residency, a live-in residency program where they're studying, they're learning, but they're actually living the lifestyle as they go through that training. So that's what they've got going on in this area. Um, Again, massive, huge vampire areas. Go ahead to the next one. So out of, the huge vampire areas in Turkey are going to be the Diyarbakir area, the Sanliurfa area, and the Gaziantep area. And then you have, out of those areas, you have what are classified as the Ottoman vampires. Um, they're going to be like you get two sigils, um, all are worshiping the same deity in Solomonic magic, which is going to be Ashtaroth. But Ashtaroth goes by many names. Her more ancient name was Lilith. So you've got two signs or two sigils for Ashtaroth. You've got her Lilith sigil, which displays the contracts under that name, and then you have Ashtaroth, which displays the contracts under that name. So in Turkey, you get a lot of your Ottoman vampires are going to work off of the contracts and authorities under Ashtaroth's Lilith name. And one of the others that you'll hear in their folklore, you got the name Yek, Y-E-K. Think about this now. where do we see that YE? And just putting that out there, where do we see the YE name? Um, that's not by accident. We also see it in its Latin form, the JE. Um, was that not, a post um, or, literally sketched into the side of the, building in Epstein Island, the JE, right? We also have Yi, um, the high priest who supposedly got out. But what is Yek? Yek? It's a demon who eats flesh and drinks blood. So um, that's their symbology of the vampire demons. The vampires can be called the Yek there. Um, or they'll take, they take the name of God, Yah. It's either would be Yahweh or Yeh, the Y-E, Yehovah is kind of where they go with that. Um, you know, so, or
So
the Y-O, anyway.
that's what I thought. Lilith would be the original vampire then.
There
Is that what
are
you're saying?
stories of that. Yeah, there's stories of that. Yeah.
And and of course, when you said yay, of course, I think all of us went Kanye West, right? Because obviously,
Yeah.
but it's only recently, more recently, they started calling him that. And I'm convinced, Jessie, that the Kanye West that divorced Kim Kardashian, or she divorced him, whatever, is not the same as the one that's hanging around with, I think, of Bianca Santori, whatever. Can't remember the Australian girl. And they've started, since then, it's like they've started calling him Ye. And, it's that sort of thing to me is very interesting. Why do you think they are doing that with Kanye West?
I think it
What's
has
the
to do
story
with
there?
those initials inscribed, the J and the E at Epstein Island. I don't think that just represents Jeffrey Epstein. I think that there's more to that, and I think that that goes directly to Kanye. And
Why?
what does he highlight? Jesus. And what are the first letters in that? JE. And, I think that it's much more than we think, and I don't believe he's out, though that's my hope. But I don't believe he or Justin Bieber or Marilyn Manson, even though they've all started this new kick on Jesus, I don't think they are really displaying a real relationship with Jesus. I think you're seeing light side, end time, um, things with their positions and their sovereign military, um, you know, displaying that name. And I think that they changed the pronunciation of that name for a reason. It's not because they've taken some advanced Kabbalah Hebrew. With Kabbalah, you have both a light side pronunciation and you have the dark side pronunciations, um, of the name that's above every other name. And then literally geometrically, you have the name of the Messiah, which I think is, the fake Messiah.